Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome everybody to the GROWL Virtual Connect show. We're excited to have some great speakers on today's show. And as you know, this is a virtual connects, and think of it as like a virtual panel discussion. Every week we bring on some new speakers. We have Kim Woodworth and I have been really fortunate to have such interesting people come on every week. And our goal is to really talk about what we can do to keep the economy moving on track, any tips and tricks, what's happening with funding, what are we considering? So as Kim and I kind of talked, and I'll let her introduce herself, it's really about adapting in a new economy. So my name's Greg Olson. I'm the founder of GROWL Agency, and we're here on Virtual Connects. So I'll let you take it from here, Kim, and you can move on with Gregory. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Again, my name is Kim Woodworth. I'm the Operations Director for the Economic Development Council of Colorado. And today I asked Gregory Howell, a friend of mine down in Pueblo, Colorado, to join us to talk to us a lot about looking at adaptive or repurposing or looking at certain things that we've done in the past and how can we do it differently. And he is the king of doing that. And so I'd like to turn it over to Gregory to get us kicked off with some of his thoughts and ideas and really where they're headed with resilient Pueblo at the Water Tower.
Yeah, Greg, thank you, Gregory. Thank you for joining. Just give yourself an introduction, and we'd love to hear more about what's happening in your world and what you're hearing out there.
Great. Well, my name's Gregory Howell, and just to give you a little bit of an introduction in terms of where my background is, I've been in Pueblo for about 8 years, and I was invited by a team of doctors to open up a network of healthcare clinics from the ground up. And I thought I would only be in Pueblo for about 2 years, but once I started to dig into the history, the culture, commerce, and the arts of Pueblo, it really just kind of triggered just an extraordinary, area of opportunity for me, being that I work in the creative economy. My title at the medical clinic was the Director of Creative Solutions. So, and that's been my title over several decades now. But the whole idea of where I am now, I'm the creative director for Watertower Place. It's the largest adaptive reuse project in the state of Colorado, one of the largest in the country. And this is a former meatpacking plant that was designed by a very famous Norwegian, Hans Peter Henschen, which was built between 1916 and 1917. Took a year to build. And he, along with Henry Ford, were the kind of champions of what we refer to as the rational factory. This is people, processes, and successful outcomes. And believe it or not, this 250,000 square foot facility has no load-bearing walls.
Really?
So he used cluster design. Kim's been on a tour, so she can tell you the nature of the building. It's really extraordinary. But if you think about it, if you're in any type of industry now, adaptability, innovation, the ability to shift and pivot, and that's a word we hear a lot these days, is really critical. And if you have a new production line and all of a sudden you realize that you've got nothing but load-bearing walls, that's just a very physical kind of nature of this manifestation. So what we've done at Watertower Place is actually 2 years ago, we really started looking at how this former meatpacking plant can really be adapted to future ways of building community. So we've been talking about, being better together, shared resources. Just the concept of sharing is something that, when we're in kindergarten, we learn that sharing is probably the most important thing, but all of a sudden we get into first grade and second grade and no one wants to share anymore.
Yeah.
And we really need to stop, thinking in those ways. But what we've done is we've actually created a vertical urban village, and we have areas of focus from high-tech food entrepreneurship and citizenry, small batch manufacturing, nonprofit alley, and our media center, which when we say media center, it's actually content creation. It's one of the largest industries in the world now, about $212 billion a year. And we can see what's happening with Netflix, with Disney. So I'm finding this whole COVID crisis as just being a reaffirmation of many of the things that we've been talking about. And we're still in the build out phase. So we're finding people at our door every day. And to help deal with that, we actually started doing tours about 2 years ago. And we had 4,000 people come through in 18 months just to see what we were doing. So it really has been a process of listening. And then we actually built the floor plans and are designing the spaces based on the feedback we're getting from the community. So that kind of gives you a background. I grew up in Japan, so I grew up in a culture where consensus-based thinking is really the mode of, project development and management, which is very different from the United States. So I'm kind of playing with both Western and Eastern kind of ways of, creating consensus, building community, and actually turning ideas into action. That's really what I do. People ask me what I do for a living. I socialize ideas.
That's interesting. I like a lot of points you have there. One, I'll write down turn ideas into action, because I think that's so important now more than ever. What we're going to have to see people do. It's like we're going to have to, in this like new economy, start to pivot and do that. And you are right about sharing, though. I think as we get, competitors don't want to share. I probably have been known for it. You kind of hold things too close to your vest kind of thing, and now more, I think that's what we're really about. Is like, how do we share these ideas? What do we share from community to community? And we're starting to see that with restaurant sharing, like we're sharing ideas with other people similar to our business. How do we keep all these people employed? And that's really what this is really about from an economic recovery too, is, through all these kind of loans we're seeing and conversations we're having is, how do we continue to keep people employed or get them back working as quick as possible? So these are all the points, Gregory.
Yeah, and the whole idea of, sharing, I mean, I love the whole open source, that whole model is just so critical because, that's where we find, excellence in diversity. I mean, once you get people honing in on an open source and you can develop, that kind of thinking is really, really helpful because it does create a critical mass, which is usually so essential when you're trying to make really impactful change in a very short period of time. And that's tricky too, because coming from like the creative economy where I deal with, makers, creatives, artists, wellness providers, and entrepreneurs. And that's kind of what we're doing right now at Watertower Places. We created this platform called Resilient Pueblo. And it's actually a new landing page. And we felt that these particular demographics are oftentimes the ones that fall through the cracks because you really can't identify them. They don't live under an umbrella. And it's really important, to actually understand, what's happening, with these particular groups. Kim, I see pulled up the page, which of course, when you think about Pueblo, I mean, Pueblo for the last 150 years has been, an extraordinary frontier kind of community. I mean, literally with the Arkansas River, Pueblo has been the international boundary with France, Spain, Mexico, the Republic of Texas. With that comes a real sense of kind of innovation, survival, can-do attitude. But when you look back, you can see from the Spanish flu, in 1918, shortly thereafter, we had the Pueblo Great Flood of 1921, destroyed the town. And it was amazing to see the resilience and the way that the town was able to rebuild. 1922, the famous Opera House burnt to the ground. And then, of course, you look at our industries. Pueblo was so heavily anchored in steel and meatpacking. And, when those industries collapse, they really do, shutter a community. So there is this real pride that I'm still understanding, each and every time I get involved with the community. But you can kind of see what we did was we looked at Resilient Pueblo, what we are doing, which really is this story that goes back 150 years. Then we look at building for the future. This is what we've been actually doing for the last 2 years. And in building for the future, we're really looking at these key areas of high tech, food entrepreneurship and citizenry, small batch manufacturing, nonprofit alley, and the media center. And these are areas we're just about to release. We have a major report that we're building the Center for Innovation and for Entrepreneurship. And these are just some of the anchors. We're not limited to this, but they are anchors. And then what we really decided to do was we decided to put together a resource section. And the resource section is all about surveys. These are links. These are actual places that you will go to get information. And the surveys, links, and resources has really been, I mean, I was looking at our just analytics on our website. In fact, there's the latest one at the very top, which of course is the PPP program, and what you need to do and who's eligible. And that's the biggest one, is who is eligible, especially with our demographics. When you look at makers, creatives, artists, wellness program, and entrepreneurs, you know, they oftentimes, they don't fit into these, you know, boxes that the government in particular.
You know, that gig economy, Gregory, that is so important that people don't realize, I think, how much it supports these communities like West Grand Junction and Pueblo and every community, right? These gig workers, right? And I've been one many times in my life, right? And it's like you spend money throughout the community and things like that. But now here we, you know, they need help. So do you mind if I ask you some questions about that? I mean, what you're
sure. No, without a doubt.
You've been on you're on this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this economic council,
right?
And what that's looking like. And you know, because again, everybody's scrambling. I've been on phone calls with businesses and one-person companies, and every day we're having those conversations like, how do we support and what's available?
Right.
You know, so one thing, you're right, people are sharing information. So we're back in kindergarten again. I feel like we're still trying to learn how to color now again. So we're going back because it's, you know, there's all this new information. So I'll let you take it from there and what you're seeing, but information.
No, the information is really important. And I'll preface it with saying, and I work extensively in Asia and in Europe. I previously used to work for the Japanese government for their foreign ministry. And of course, I was very much engaged in the Olympics, which of course now that's being pushed a year out. But what I'm finding now is it doesn't matter where you are. If you're in Europe, if you are in, you know, Latin America, if you're in the United States or in Asia, what I'm finding is that the playing field is going to be leveled across the board. And it doesn't matter if you're in Denver or New York, or if you're in Pueblo or in Tokyo or in Delhi. Now, because of technology, and of course, there are a lot of other issues with supply chain and things of that sort, but by leveling the playing field, what it's going to do, it's going to offer huge opportunities for those that are really strategically aligned, not only with their mission, but where their passions are. And if they've really targeted the audiences where they really need to be kind of moving forward with, because ultimately, I think as horrific as this whole crisis is, you know, we need to look forward. So one of the things I can say about the governor, and he created what's called the Economic Stabilization and Growth Council, which has several subcommittees. And I'm on one of those subcommittees, which is really looking at kind of the creative economy on that end. And that's where you find a lot of these gig employees or 1099ers or anyone in those particular areas. And, you know, they're doing multiple jobs. You know, anyone who has to kind of meet those monthly demands when it comes to the bills, you're going to find that, you know, those don't disappear. They keep coming back month by month. So how do you actually find that? So I just got off the call with the governor and with many of those that are involved in that particular council. And the big thing today, of course, is the, you know, the payroll protection, you know, the PPP plan. And there are three really simple things that have to happen right now. And it is of a timely nature. And that's prepare, apply, and comply.
All right.
Those are the three things. And basically,
let me say it again, prepare,
apply, and comply.
Thank you. Okay, good.
And there are different phases. So there are different ways that we need to look at this, because some things are set up now for smaller businesses. And then, of course, on April 10th, if you are a 1099er, if you're a gig employee, all of those are going to kick in. They'll be available on the 10th, but you need to start preparing now. And what I mean by prepare is you need to look at your payroll. You need to get those numbers together. You need to look at, you know, your rent, and you need to look at your utilities, because when you have those three, you're going to be able to go into a matrix, kind of it'll calculate for you what this forgivable loan will be all about. Thanks, Kim, for showing that. So they kind of show you where all the different categories are. The other thing that's really critical, and this is where I was on a call with the treasurer yesterday, is that this is going through local banks, but not all local banks are actually part of this program yet, and we don't know if they're all going to be part of it. I know you said earlier that your bank was being really proactive, which is awesome. But there is a way to find out if your bank or where you need to go. And this is all part of, the website is sba.gov and it's /PPT. And there is actually a branch locator, a bank locator,
Oh, wow.
which will help you find these resources. If for any reason you have any trouble finding, there is a number you can call specifically in regards to this for Colorado, which is 303-860-5881. Again, that number, if you have any questions or you need help, and boy, be patient. I can only imagine what the demands are going to be for this line. And I don't know if it's 24/7. We'll have to find out, but it's 303-860-5881. And that is really important right now. And then even if you fit into the April 10th qualification date, you still need to do the same preparation. So again, preparing, then you apply online, so it's very quick, and then you just have to comply, and all of this will be forgiven. So this money, I forget, it was $349 billion. I can't remember the amount.
I think
Phase
that's right.
3.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, this will be forgiven if you are in fact, qualify. And I'm kind of in a unique category because I'm a 1099er, but I also have my own LLC with employees. So I'm going to be navigating this from 2 different levels, as I think many probably will. So, we're into this day 1 right now today. As we speak, this is going live. So there's a lot of good information, but my only concern, and I haven't checked myself personally yet, is I need to see which of my banks are actually, participating. So
yeah, that's going to be the interesting part as we go through this. I will give Timberline Bank here in Grand Junction, Colorado, was very proactive early this week, and they're set up. I mean, they even had pictures last night of them working at night and submitting things past midnight. So, I think people banks realize that they're going to have to get ahead of it for their clients. I think these community banks a lot of them are ahead of it. Their connection.
Well, that's interesting too. Yeah, because even just the other day, Chase wasn't even part of it. So, it's not just little banks. There's
so much to do. You got to change. Yeah. Imagine how much we have to change our processes.
Right.
And banks have to do the same thing. Right. So I just know everybody in the financial world, they're working very hard. As Kim knows, we typically have on someone from local chambers on talking about what they're seeing, and they're hosting. They're actually having local banks come on and talk about it. And
I think that's great.
Yep.
At the end of the day, I think the figure they even said, and Kim, you might know this better, it was like 660,000 qualifying businesses in the state of Colorado. That's just, a huge number when you start looking at what we're actually dealing with. But I think the most positive thing that came out of this call with the governor just about an hour ago was, and he said this at the outset, is how Colorado is positioning itself for success. So there's already this mindset that, right now it's about stabilization. It's about how can we stabilize. And luckily, it looks like with the health, crisis, we're seeing some really positive trends. There's still so much unknown, but, and then the other thing is they're looking at best thinking. The best thing about this council is it's made up of people from all over the state. So it wasn't just urban, it wasn't just rural, and it wasn't just high tech versus, it's not, the Boulder, Denver, northern state versus the South state. It was the whole state. But the last part was, and this is what I was so excited about, because this is where we are, and we need to continue thinking once we get through all of this kind of craziness that we're dealing with right now on our own front line, our own front porch, is the whole idea of looking at emerging and new models, because that's really where we're going to find extraordinary opportunity. And as I said earlier, this isn't just a US issue. This is a global issue. And when you level the playing field globally, boy, let me tell you, local is going to be even more important than it ever was before. And that's a huge opportunity for everyone to really engage, locally.
It does, and that reminds me. So I want to say again, we have Gregory Howell on here, creative director, one of his titles of Watertower Place in Pueblo, for people that have joined a little bit later. And we have Kim Woodworth with Economic Development Council of Colorado. You're welcome to ask questions through the chat box, and we'll get those covered as we go through. And just to kind of bring that halfway through our show today. So one of the things, Greg, you're so true about local, because I think that's from an economic development mindset. I think that's where it's going to like ripple effect out, right? Is that we're going to take care of our own. And in Pueblo, I think what I've known about over the years, and is really you always are started the resiliency, as you talk about the website Resilient Pueblo, is that you kind of took care of your own in looking at Watertower Place and getting the right, supporting the right companies. So what tips do you think you have for any, since we're flattening the playing field, if your friends of yours, Japan are listening to you right now, I would hope we go global one day like that. But now that you're on, maybe show, but what tips do you have for people?
I think the most important thing, I teach radical empathy, and it's not radical at all. It's just that, and this is going to be one of those real tests of humanity. And you look at the word humankind. Just look at those two components, human and kind.
Sure.
There's empathy is just the ability to actually step back and actually put yourself into someone else's shoes, into someone else's place. And unfortunately, we're a little misguided in terms of, that notion, coming from Japan, where it's a consensus-based society, it can be the complete opposite, because their whole decision-making process is they'll spend years planning it to get consensus. And then when their plan is finished, they're able to execute in a matter of moments. We're the opposite. We'll make a decision really quickly, and then we'll take forever to execute it. But as far as tips are concerned, it's got to begin with your audience, your target audiences, who are in your immediate community. So what we did was we identified, I reached out to the community. We have 5 broadcast channels that we're launching at Watertower Place. And these are, you can look at there's a whole section on our website called Broadcast Pueblo. And it actually is an opportunity. We found that youth now, and in fact, we're doing what we call stories of resilience. So these are blog posts that are talking about, these are all tips, these are all suggestions about what others are doing, from teachers. We have the fashion designer and she's our first story, LaDoris Burton. She was making masks from day one. This goes back to our very first story. And then we have wellness providers. What do you do in these very strange situations where, you're actually living with people that you're not used to having around 24/7? I joked with Kim the other day, there are some positive things too. We may find some workers are just better working from home than they are in the workplace.
Sure.
There's a lot of different things that we can look at this. But as far as tips are concerned, we felt that the most important thing is you got to first understand who your target audiences are. Because you could be spewing information out which has very little value unless it's really targeted. That's why we looked at makers, creatives, artists, wellness providers, and entrepreneurs. They're kind of that really kind of slippery, that they're fluid in a lot of ways. And that's a real plus. That's a real asset when it comes to resilience, is having that ability to be in different places at different times, or multitasking. And as far as I'm concerned, I've worked with people, all over the world in different cultures, different languages. But when you can get someone that can be independent, multitask, work as a team, not necessarily physically as a team, because right now we're all in this shared reality of social distancing. And that's kind of how I frame and reference everything. But you know what? It's no different than before. It's just the COVID crisis has really put health front and center, and it really has identified, what is really important at the end of the day. And this goes back to leveling the playing field. I'm hoping now, I'm a huge advocate of food accessibility, which is a huge problem in Southern Colorado. And we have a tagline in our wellness program: you either pay the farmer or you pay the doctor. You choose.
I do like that.
And if we can actually get our urban communities to partner with our rural communities when it comes to food accessibility, we could change that paradigm overnight. Because what we're finding, Dan Hobbs and Nana Meyer, who are some of the top specialists in food citizenry in the world, as far as I'm concerned, they live in our community. Nana Meyer is a professor at UCCS. Dan Hobbs, he is with the Farmers Union. He's been doing amazing things on the ground in the fields, but he has always had the capacity, and this is something I find really unique about Pueblo, is usually globally, when we went from the Industrial Revolution, we kind of left the agrarian society at the wayside, and industry took over. Pueblo luckily kept its agriculture front and center just as much as steel and mining. So we have these amazing legacy industries that are still, kind of tandem, parallel. And so what we're finding now, Dan Hobbs is posting that there's this huge demand now for locally sourced, locally grown food. That was not the case just a month ago. I mean, yes, there were always those purists out there who wanted to make sure that they had organic or sustainable farming, but that is not, we're so used to this 90-some% of, industrial commercialized farming, that you talk about going local and you're talking about food security. That's the third group that the governor put together, was food security.
When I came home from Denver last month, after I got my parents all settled, I couldn't even find eggs. And so it was the first thing I did was text my friends in Palisade and said, do you know anyone who, we obviously have missing chickens that are running around here. Where are the eggs? And so certainly I was able to find eggs, but it was locally found and locally sourced. So again, it's pivoting back and bringing our economy back in and onshoring. And the more that we can keep our economy running within our local community, the better off we're going to be able to open up again back to a larger audience.
And I think too, if you talk about this whole idea of, food security, food accessibility, it's really important to be able to have that strength on the local level. It's really important. And it's a trend that should have already been, in existence much at a greater level long before COVID. We're just finding now that it took a health crisis to actually force us to realize that we really do need to support those local farmers. And not just local farmers, just look at Main Street.
Local business.
Look at Main Street. I mean, I can't wait until we get through this health crisis, because that defines everything that we do right now at the outset. But once we're able to actually go back, and this is where my fears are, is since I do work extensively in Japan and China and Asia, and even in Europe, is they're finding situations where they start to loosen up the restrictions of health, and all of a sudden they start to see resurgences. So this is not just, one crisis. We need to think about this in terms of, so that's where local is so important. Because if we do find resurgences, I mean, right now we're finding the only safe place is at home. So if we can think of our local community as that safe place, we need to think about that on a lot of different levels. I just am, thankful that I've been engaged in a project, at Watertower Place that's already been thinking about this. And it's not that it's anything new. I think it's just, I'm looking at the Farmer's Almanac now and finding that to be just such a huge resource.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think you're right about that, eggs and bread and meat. I mean, now we're actually, people are finding local meat markets, where they have people baking their own bread in these bakeries in town. And I'm seeing, kind of that resurgence to what that means to buy local, not just your local city market or Safeway or things like that. Because I know they're also working hard to keep things stocked, but yet,
Right.
they're having a tough time. And now we're going to see, I think, more people wanting to garden at home, right? And setting up their own gardens. And what does that mean? Because if people are at home, and
And on that gardening front, that's really important too, because you know, we have, all communities are looking at the urban farming component, and here is, a huge opportunity. When you talking about building community, food at its very, very basic is such, I mean, it's an essential of life. And
yeah,
so to be able to know, first of all, to know where your food is coming from is such a huge deal. But I just think that sends a huge message across all business sectors, because at the end of the day, you need food and wellness. I mean, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur. In fact, entrepreneurs are probably the ones that need it the most, because, they're the ones that are usually so caught up in this 24/7 passion project that they do tend to not think about their food so much. They don't tend to think about a lot. So I think it's a
yeah.
huge opportunity for us to pivot and refocus on something that's already right at our doorstep.
Yeah, I agree with you on all of that. And that's, I mean, we talk about radical empathy. I think it fits into like mental health discussions we're
Yep.
having about, how this is stressing like it is a global item that now really don't understand, like, how do we take it all in? And I think having a little bit of empathy will go a long way. I see others practice it more, much like yourself, and to be kind to other humans. And I do, like supply chain management, those kind of words, and local manufacturing. And this is the thing we've seen maker spaces step up and start manufacturing, face masks and things like that for the hospitals. And we never thought of it that way before, these hobbyist kind of things, where now we have
Right. Right.
entrepreneurs, where you're starting to see in your city, I'm sure, where people are like, yeah, we can come in, we can step up and start making these things for, our local hospital. And, we don't have to wait for it to come from China or from overseas or from somewhere. So I'd like to see more of that in the future also, that we kind of rely on our own, own local economy to solve our problems and things like that. So,
And also not forgetting, the most vulnerable. We tend to, here we're having a global health crisis.
yes.
And, you start thinking about the most vulnerable. I mean, I oftentimes get frustrated when I look at, communities and, how many homeless shelters are there? How many soup kitchens are there? Colorado has a unique climate too, which requires even more heightened attention to that whole issue of wellness. And so, yeah, we're all dealing with this front and center, but I step back and I think, oh my gosh, what about all the homeless people? What about those people that don't even have access to food? What about the kids who are now at home and, one, first, do not have internet access, and two, even if they do have internet access, what if they only have one device and there are three kids? I start looking at those things too. So that's where empathy, my gosh, I mean, it just helps understand, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. You can't get around that at all. And I think it's just understanding, one, what can you do first and foremost for yourself, and then for your immediate family and those that are critical just to your own well-being, but then start taking those circles out. I live in concentric circles. That's just how I think, and that's how I live. And I'm finding more and more of us are in that overlap.
Yeah,
No matter how crazy you are.
I think we are living, our circles have gotten a little closer together. I mean, now we're having more time at home or work from home. And you're exactly right. I mean, teachers have had to adapt about how they're teaching students. And I think in the outside of this, I'm more optimistic. I think probably like you are, Gregory, and I know Kim
Yeah.
is,
Yes.
That we're going to have better processes in place than we had before. I know my own company, we're becoming much more streamlined. And, although we miss collaborating, we're in that creative environment, which you understand, Gregory, is that, sometimes like just a face-to-face, looking at something on a screen together, noodling thoughts together, but we do have these other ways that we're going to connect. And I think we'll be more efficient, but how we climb out of it together as, community by community, I think that's how we're going to get there, over the rest of this year and next year and things like that.
Right. And those are our strengths. I mean, those are the strengths that we have. We have the capacity. I mean, it's always been shown. And you know, I just look forward to those moments where you can actually then reintroduce the human component.
Yeah,
Because we are going to need to do that in a smart way. But in the meantime, there's business at hand, you know, whether it's your own personal wellness or whether it's, you know, your own business, or there's so many things that you can do, you know, and that's why I think it's so important, you know, back to your, you know, just your suggestions, you know, you really got to target those audiences. Where can you make the greatest impact? You know, first and foremost, your family, and then look at those groups that have always been there for you and you've always been there for them. That's never going to change. But ultimately then, you know, it's going to be, you know, it's, you just don't flip the switch in a situation like this.
No.
You got to understand what switch you flip on first, you know, and then second and third and fourth. So
it's going to be how we turn the lights back on.
Yeah.
I think in like neighborhood by neighborhood is how it's going to work. I mean, you know, in our neighborhood, we're trading, you know, toilet paper, whiskey, and wine together. People need everything, right?
I like that.
You know, Kim knows what I'm talking about. I want to just kind of wrap this up because I like to be conscious of people's time and, you know, and just how they're listening to this in the future. Kim, any kind of final points of what's going on out there? Anywhere you want to point them on your website and things that you're seeing? We'll continue to have these kind of shows. Hopefully they get more lighthearted. I do appreciate Gregory being on. It's nice to have information that's lighthearted, positive. That's what we need. There's a lot of like, I don't even want to watch the news. I read the paper online, lots of different, and headlines are not fun right now. So Kim, in closing, what do you, and maybe you have something at work from home tip that you're seeing, that you're doing or have adapted to or stay at home. So
yes. Well, I've been working from home. I actually run a statewide organization from my home. So this was a new reality for me 5 years ago. And so I've had to figure out, you know, you work out first thing in the morning, you take the dog for a walk at 11, and then you've got to do something at 3 o'clock, whether it's running a vacuum or take the dog for a walk again. But sitting is no good. So you have to get up, you got to move. And you do need to find the positivity in everything. And I think that the more that we all start talking about, and you know, we've seen the news, we've seen commercials starting to really come out to really talk about togetherness and really working together as partners through this. We will rise to the top. More hands make less work or light work. And then there's only one other thing too about this payroll protection program that I do want to highlight. It is for businesses who have laid off their workers. If they bring their employees back before June 30th, they can also participate in this program. And I can't stress any more at this point in time is that you've already got those workers trained. It's going to be so much harder for you to ramp up afterwards if you had let everybody go and then you have to rehire again and retrain. It's a very expensive proposition. But if you can get those folks back onto that payroll protection, it not only does that money go to, you can use it for payroll, but you can also use it for operational expenses like your mortgage and your rent, your utilities. If you're using it for those purposes, then you can then have that forgived later, but you have to just show those receipts is basically all it is. And so why not take advantage of it? This is the time to do it. So, but we do have a very short time. And I do believe that, you know, if you do go to the SBA /PPP, you will be able to find those banks that are already participating. And generally it's the FDIC banks, which most banks are FDIC approved. And so, but they will tell you, it's just that some of these banks like Chase are just waiting for a few more regulations. And so we might see a lot of this get ironed out by next week. So now is the time to get your information together, get ready for your application, connect with your banker. And then we will see a lot of this start to flesh out next week. But time is of the essence and we want everyone getting back to work as quickly as possible. So as quickly as we can ramp up and be ready, out the chute, we're ready to go, do it. And then the only other thing is, you know, this is the new environment. And so if you can figure out how to work, have your employees be working from home, if you can figure out this technology piece, and we do have a lot of folks that are coming to us that are helping us with the cloud space, with the voice over IP and how to work through these technology issues. If we can get more companies working through some of those issues, you know what, we're not going to need to worry so much about getting to the office space again and working into this big environment. We can still be working. The economy is still moving. The faster we can get out the outshoot, the faster we're going to get ramped up. So that's my tidbit for this week.
Well, I think we'll be saying that every week. I think, Kim, what I appreciate with you is you're seeing things across the state, across the United States, and we'll continue to share those tips and stories. And Gregory, I appreciate the comments about we're kind of leveling the playing field, and everything that in your global perspective and bringing it back local, because I think that's really what we're all here is. I think we can make the biggest impact together locally in our neighborhood today. And how do you get involved? In closing, I wanted to see, like, do you have any tips or things that you say about how should people get it? How should people get involved now locally? Because, maybe they had their own business, or maybe they're staying at home, they can't do anything. But as these switches come back on, as you said, what do you think people can do or to get involved and help their local economy?
Well, I think first and foremost, most people, if they've been engaged in their community, whether it's through their business, whether it's through their church, whether it's through their school, whether it's through an affinity group, everyone has their own unique networks.
Sure.
Some are better than others at that. But now I think this is probably the most, we will never have this opportunity to be, hopefully we won't. But we're in a situation now where if we are at home and we're staying at home, there's a lot of time. And that's a whole other issue in itself. But what I would recommend is, don't waste this time. Yes, we can't do a lot of things, but there's a lot that we can do to prepare. So if you have a passion, or if you want to connect, you'll find ways to connect with those groups that you really care about locally. But more importantly, what is it that you've wanted to do that you've never had the time to do? You can't go out on a vacation. You can't go visit those places that you've always wanted to visit, which would probably be the first thing that I would do if I was able to go and I didn't have to work. But right now you can't. What are those, say you want to learn how to do something, there's certification programs. Look at the booming business of online certification and things where you could learn, maybe it's a computer program. Maybe it's just something you need to do at home. Or there's some other.
I want to learn the guitar. I want to learn the guitar. But
there you go. There you go. No, music is huge. I'm working with musicians now on one of our channels, and they're going to start teaching, and they're hopefully going to provide this free and then for minimal fee. But ultimately, they want to be able to, when this is all over with and done, start doing intermediate and advanced lessons. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, but your resources are right at your front door. And you may not have been paying attention to them. Now they're even more important than ever.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of groups that are starting to form, definitely on Facebook. So there's a lot of community resource type business task forces that are being pulled together in each part, not just in our state, all over the country.
Right.
And so I really challenge you to go and look at your community. Generally, it will start with your local economic development or chamber, or even the incubators. So look there first, if not the municipality, but they will have, places where these communities are really starting to pull together and really have these conversations more and more. So there's definitely ways to get connected to those other businesses out there. The more the businesses can come together, the quicker you can solve a problem.
That's right. And in regards to wellness, if it's wellness that you're looking for, Broadcast Pueblo, we have yoga on the terrace, Tai Chi on the terrace, Zumba for kids. We've got reading, we've got breathing, we've got napping. We have all of these programs that were already planned for Watertower Place on our 4th floor. And we have a solo camera crew that's working with one individual, one thought leader, to do social distancing. And we're going to make this available free of charge on Broadcast Pueblo. It's part of our wellness and food citizenry platform. So stay tuned for that. But if it's wellness, we have a Startup Pueblo channel also that Mark Maddock, who's part of the Southern Colorado Innovation Link, He's curating that with several small businesses in Pueblo. So we're going to make those programming initiatives available in the short term. Ultimately, we hope then that it will continue to build the network so that we can actually physically be together. We'll feel comfortable. We will already know each other and know what we're, what our likes and dislikes, what our strengths and weaknesses are. So that's kind of what we're doing now at Watertower Place to bridge that gap.
I see there's so much interesting, cool content being produced. There's people reading to kids online that, parents can have that, like you said, exercise classes. I know one of our employees, he created a YouTube channel of how to work out at home, and he has like a massive can of like beans that he does different workouts and towel workouts, and he has a YouTube channel that he posts something. Our designers created a community coloring book that you can download that just they're trying to create things, and so now we have a coloring game going on, and I'm actually, if you saw, I'm sketching in my coloring book. So it is trying to get out of our head and things that don't worry, so Gregory, I do appreciate hearing all those, and we'll post those links of what's happening and give people a resource of where to go. Right. And that's Thank you. I can travel to Pueblo and I don't even have to leave my house, right?
There you go.
And then one day we'll sit down together face to face and do this. But I don't have anything to add. I think I really appreciate Kim and Gregory for taking valuable time today to share insights with local businesses, local people listening, and people that will be listening. With that, we're going to close out, and I wish you all an amazing day.